Good evening, BookTube. I've spent a somewhat lonely Sunday watching a Wimbledon, 6-hour Wimbledon match from 20 years ago and finishing the New York Times book review, June edition, summer reading edition, that my mom was nice enough to send me, unbidden, cost her $20 to send, light as it is, package postage being what it is these days, from the States, though she's a Brit. She lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to here in Bangkok. I was thinking of giving a sort of overview of the review. I really have in my life, in case you think I'm some sort of highbrow, this type of person always reading the book review. I've read through a whole New York Times book review in my lifetime. I can count on one hand, I'm sure. So I did end up reading a bunch of New Yorkers for a while because I had an old pile of them. But except for the humor stuff in there, it's not really so much my scene. And in fact, I haven't lived in New York City that much. I lived in the Bronx as a boy, and in Staten Island as a adult in a commune. Very interesting story for another time. So what I think I'm going to do instead is I'll talk for just a couple minutes about the overall issue. If you'd like to hear more about the whole issue, I can do a follow-up discussion for that. But I think I want to focus in on one review in particular. I think that would be the best way to spend our time together. And thank you for joining me. It's nice to have someone to talk to. So the book review begins with you got your, table of contents, which I'll go through with you. It begins with this summer reading bucket list, sort of check-off list here, you can see. It says to read one of the New York Times best books of the 21st century. Not a list I recommend, sorry. Did I do a video on that? I'm not sure. To read a book published in the last year. Well, I don't need to tell BookTube to do that. They like to do that. I'd actually challenge you to read one written 200 years ago, at least. Read a book in a genre you don't typically read. That's always a good idea. There are a lot of genres not covered in this book review. Read a book in translation. Also a wonderful idea. There are very few covered in this book review, sad to say. In fact, that's the major takeaway, is the book review is, it's overwhelmingly Anglo-European. Apologies to any Canadians that might have been in there that I didn't know. Read a book by a writer you've never read before. They've got a good mix of new names in here, or at least new to me, but certainly a lot of the usual suspects. Read a book you loved as a kid. They do cover children's literature for one page. Listen to an audiobook. Read a book set somewhere you've never been. Read a book that takes place during the summer, of course, and read one from your local library. And they do have a Beach Reads article in here, which is kind of funny what they consider Beach Reads as opposed to what I suspected it was going to be. And I'm interested to see that Beach Reads is a category that still exists in our phone age, because I think the airport book has sort of gone the way of the dodo now that people have all the entertainment in the air. So let me tell you about the table of contents, and then we'll jump into the review that I want to highlight for you. So it's got a bunch of fiction. You've got Rosalind Drexler's Smithereens. Then you've got historical fiction. They do 3 usually in the genre fiction reviews. There's Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. Then we've got thrillers, 3 reviewed thrillers. Fever Beach by Carl Hyacin, who's a funny writer. I enjoyed him. I consider him a good beach read. A kind of thriller humor, right? Light. Page Turner. Something called State Champ by Hilary Plum. The Deserters by Matthias and Art. I've read all of these articles and within the last week, and I've already sort of forgotten what half of them are about, which is not a good sign either for the books, but probably more for the reviews. The Deserters by Matthias and Art, and then we get a bunch of nonfiction. So we've got, we had in the beginning something called I Regret Almost Everything by Keith McNally. Then we get the Tequila Wars, which is a kind of talks about the Jose Cuervo the history of the Cuervo family business. Then Lower Than the Angels, a history of sex and Christianity, which was interesting. And then The Illegals, about the sleeper spies from Russia. Uh, in the States, they did a TV show on that not long ago. Uh, Article that I enjoyed about a bio of Gala Dali, who's was not just Dali's wife, but really a very active partner in their madness and their life that they constructed together, and really interesting characters. So that's that I definitely would like to read that book. That I went away from this wanting to read three or four of the books, which is not a lot because if you figure they review, I don't know how many, almost 100 books here. You got the Rebel Romanovs about Julie of Saxe-Coburg, about marrying princesses off to make alliances. And then sort of think we come back to fiction again. We've got the crime and mystery section. We've got The Director by Daniel Kellman. Then we have nonfiction, Eminent Jews. It features, the book features Bernstein, Brooks, Friedan, and Mailer. It's an interesting mélange. So that's three of them are bios or memoirs. So that's interesting of the whole swath of nonfiction that exists. And then back to fiction, we got Thrilled to Death by stories by selected stories. Thrilled to Death. Okay, so that's and again another set of probably 3 reviews of short stories. And we've got The Animal Memoirs Are Going Wild. This is talking about how the popular pets memoirs boom is morphing into memoirs of wilder animals, octopuses, all that sort of thing. You've probably noticed. Then we have the Maverick Museum, Barnes and His American Dream, by Blake Gopny. That's a fiction. Then we have some spotlights of authors. So we've got one on Terry Pratchett. We've got one on Emily Henry, who I don't know, who writes in the romance genre. And then a spotlight of a publisher, which is Tilted Axis, bringing translations to the States. There's visuals, a couple pictures in the back. There's the 2 children's books reviewed, Chest Full of Words by Rebecca Googer and Simon Rothberger, and then something called Ashimpa, The Mysterious Word by Katerina Sobral. No idea. Someone who knows about children's fiction, please can tell us what kinds of children's fiction the NYT usually reviews and how they choose out of all the millions of children's books. Then what I liked best, I think, were the features. So there's By the Book. There's the Summer Reading Preview. There's another profile of Liz Moore. There's something called Roving Eye, where they review The Living Mountain by Nan Shepard, which is the review I'm going to share with you, by Sadie Stein. And then there's that article I told you about, The Beach Reads. All right, so why do I want to share this one review with you? Because honestly, I found the reviews very serviceable, very safe, and not really outstanding. So I wanted to pick one that I did think was outstanding and talk about, go through it and see if, you agree. And maybe we can use that as a template to improve our reviewing or book discussions or analysis or whatever you want to call them on BookTube. I started out very much in the philosophy of wanting to do analysis and discussions, and sort of drifted in and out, back and forth between review and that as I've evolved here on BookTube, and really still not sure where I want to land. But what I do know is there are a lot of reviews on BookTube that say almost nothing about the book, and that's not helpful, right? So I definitely would like to, talk about ways that we can talk about even new releases, right? These are all new releases, even without giving spoilers, and yet really convey something about the book. I think this one does a good job. All right, Living Mountain by Nan Shepard, 22. Here we go. So one thing that you're going to notice is that there's going to be a reference to a tiniest bit of research. So a reference to other criticism of the work. And that is literally limited to something in the introduction to the book. So it's not necessary, although it's certainly lovely, to have a background in the author or the genre or whatever, or to do a huge amount of research. I generally don't watch other booktube videos before I do my own because I want to have my own voice. I will sometimes, especially if it's an old classic that I've read lots or read a long time ago, look and see what the current scholarship on that is. Because, of course, my scholarship about these books is very dated now. And believe it or not, literary criticism, like all the disciplines, it evolves with time. So I will sometimes research a tiny bit before I talk about a work with you guys, especially if I'm not developing, although that's very rare, if I haven't read it and developed a strong lens on it of my own angle that I want to take on it, then I might look at the literature as well. So we start off very easily with an introductory paragraph in 1944. 51-year-old Nan Shepherd, coming off an unhappy love affair, turned her attention to the manuscript that would become The Living Mountain, a book about Scotland Cairngorm's mountain range, which she had been climbing since childhood. Very basic, all right? So we've got two paragraphs that follow that basically just expound on that. A little bit of the publishing history. She, wrote a lot of some poetry about the mountains and that sort of thing. Then she lists which I'm terrible at, giving the publisher and the page count and all that good stuff. You guys are very good at that. They give you all that in the fourth paragraph here. So it's from Scribner, 123 pages, paperback, $18. Out in this new edition, and it has this intro by travel writer Robert McFarlane, whose work I don't know, but I'd like to find out. So now we've got a tiny bit here on McFarlane, and basically one paragraph on him, and then we come back to him later on for just a tiny bit. So basically, this is to explore the genre question. So McFarlane's asked, is this celebratory prose poem? Is it a geo-poetic quest? Is it a place paean? Is it a philosophical inquiry into nature and knowledge? A metaphysical mashup of Presbyterianism and Tao? And so you see she uses him as a good place to talk about the genre. She doesn't offer her own take on, what she might think about what genre it is, which would have been nice to just, have her take on that. But that's okay. We have a very interesting question. So we've given nothing away, no spoilers, but I already have a strong sense of this book, that it's like touching on all these different genres. So I want to know about this book, like how is it touching on these genres? It's not enough to tell me, oh, this book is amazing. I want you to, I don't want to give it away, so I want you to read it, so I won't tell you about it, right? That doesn't inspire me to want to go read the book that I now know nothing about. Is that too cruel? All right, so next we come down to the reviewer's personal viewpoint. This is the part that I think a lot of booktubers provide. Happens to be my least favorite part, but it's fine. I came to it in 2018 as the Alpine Club of London. But it's nice. I mean, it's, not as important in a one-off review as it is, I think, for your channels, developing a rapport with your readers, your watchers. So I understand why that's there. There's kind of a longish paragraph about all of that. I think it's okay for this next bit. First of all, they talk about their reading in other nature travel writers. So now they are giving a personal viewpoint, but that is also interesting, right, in putting the author in context with other writers. So this reviewer, sorry, I told you the name earlier, Sadie Stein. Ms. Stein likes Bruce Chatwin and John Muir and Peter Matthiessen, one of my favorites. So mentions them. The feeble, far-sighted kid in me found them alienating in their steely rigor. Okay, so not only that, she has a take on these others, and apparently prefers Nan Shepherd. She finds, I guess, more approachable. But then there's also this, if you're going to sort of give us some of your daily experience or whatever, I think it's also really to give us a bit of your worldview. I think, or at least when I'm meeting a scholar, That's what I'm interested in. Of course, your human experience, but also this reviewer gives us a really interesting nugget, I think, of sort of their life view. So what they say is that the tent rigging, hiking, all that stuff was not for them. This is not an outdoors person. And then says, thankfully, this is optional in the age bracket she has attained, like mine, probably. But she said, and then she says, really interesting, because what is adulthood if not a chance to construct a world that disguises your weaknesses? So that isn't really necessarily, I don't know that that's a theme in the book that she's reviewing. Just a little aside comment of this reviewer to give me a little bit of their personality and a thoughtful nugget. Like, oh, that's interesting. Is that true? Am I disguising my weaknesses by not going camping in my age? All right, so now we're going to jump into the meat, what I would call the meat of the review. And immediately we do this with not overly long, but a long quote from the reading. And then you're going to see there are going to be 3 more short quotes, 3 or 4, then ending with another longish one. So we've got, between 5 and 6 times that the reviewer is giving us direct nuggets of gold from the book. And so that's one thing I really look for in my booktube discussions. Because if you tell me that it's hilarious, even if I trust you, I've seen you and I like your sense of humor, it still doesn't tell me if the book is hilarious, in the way of like sort of a dry satire, or hilarious in the way of sort of a joke kind of hilarious writing. So yeah, we need to substantiate, right, the things that we make claims about. So here it goes. Part of Shepard's appeal is she's a teacher to her bones, so she can she explores the elements here, and she talks about the cold water stinging the palate, the throat tingles unbearably, cold air smacks the back of the mouth. Anyway, she gives a longish little description there to show that without even a picture, the prose is descriptive in a way that this reviewer finds teacherly, which is interesting. That's generous to us teachers, and so she demonstrates that that prose with that citation, and ends it with this little quote: the smell of sawed pine is like strawberry jam on the boil, but with a tang that tautens the membranes of nose and throat. Cairngorm water is like the green of winter skies, but lucent, clear like aquamarines, without the vivid brilliance of glacier water. So I'm already getting a sense of this author's prose style and the sorts of descriptions and the functions that they might be serving vis-a-vis that earlier discussion of the different genres. Right? Are these contemplative? You're sitting in your rocking chair thinking back, or are these immediate and visceral and in your nose? Right? Okay. So the next paragraph is very short. Yet Shepard's world is explicitly corporeal. Her mountains more friend than God. Life up here is full of loves, hates, jealousies, tendernesses, loyalties, and betrayals like anywhere else, and a great deal of plain humdrum happiness. So here she puts the point on that. Yes, this for her, this is a very real, visceral, immediate, and impactful, sensual relationship to the nature, not a more contemplative, thorough, like transcendentalist take on things. Also, this is telling me in this. See, this is why these direct quotes are so important. They tell you so much. So I've already gotten from this one quote that she's going to talk about different people climbing mountains and their interactions, which is a whole nother world that I know nothing about and I think would be interesting to find out about. And I'm glad to know that it's going to be discussed at least a little bit in this work. Sorry to hear that, though, that the mountain climbers are as petty as the rest of us. All right, so then there's another one more paragraph with an assertion followed by the backup quote. So she says that indeed she's not always alone. So the mountains are people with guides, trail keepers, fellow travelers, as well as those who have died on their treks when the weather turned. Of these unfortunate souls, Shepard writes, they committed, I suppose, an error of judgment, but I cannot judge them, for it is the risk we must all take when we accept individual responsibility for ourselves on the mountain. And until we have done that, we do not begin to know it. So it being the mountain or it being responsibility. So here we see that nonetheless, it's possible that some of these observations are going to bring us to interesting philosophical discussions. Yes, what does it mean to be responsible to a level where a slip means death, right? This is a high level of responsibility. You need to get that knotted. I've put people on belay, believe it or not, back in my old days at a weight I could climb rocks and stuff like that. And yeah, you have that person's life or well-being at least in your hands. You definitely need to make sure that you're on belay and your equipment is checked over and correct and all that good stuff. This is a really interesting sort of responsibility, right? All right, so then there's one more paragraph with a quick, you get the idea. So there's one more paragraph with a quick quote backing it up. This is knowing, not judging. The knowing and not knowing, the more one learns the intricate tissue of soil, altitude, weather, and the living tissue of plants and insects, the more the mystery deepens. So now we are getting into a bit of mystery. So one beauty of this work is its adaptability, she says. And then she points out a few things showing how it's adaptable without quotes. You don't always have to have a quote. Here's an interesting throwaway sentence that's in there. So Shepard's 1944 manuscript predates Maurice Merleau-Ponty's The Phenomenology of Perception by a year. I do know Merleau-Ponty. I don't remember The Phenomenology of Perception. However, what I'm noticing here is that the author found something very interesting, like a philosophical point at which they became very interested in knowing the anxiety of influence, as Bloom used to call it, between these two authors in whichever direction it flowed, or both. But it's a throwaway. Yes, I've got this other fascinating insight, but I'm not sure a ton of people want to get into a long philosophical, intertextual discussion of Merleau-Ponty and the Living Mountain in this brief review. So that's another great thing, sort of like knowing what rabbit holes not to go down into, right, in a 15-minute video or whatever. This is going to end up being probably a 20-minute one. So that's I thought was another important thing for me to point out to you all. So not every thread is followed to its conclusion. And so that's sort of the end of the meat of the discussion, right? So then we have just a sort of personal take of this whole thing. It says, I see Shepard as a valuable guide, etc., etc. And then a wrap-up paragraph. Recently, I listened to the Living Mountain on audiobook. And ending, again, as I said, with a longish quote. I was especially struck this time by her expressed dislike of describing the mountain in magical terms. So we've been going back and forth on this question, right, of how prosaic or how lyrical the approach to the mountain is, right? Whether that's a genre question or a philosophical question or a worldview question, or all of them probably, right? And so she ends on that question, on that debate, which seems to have really become her major take on this, or her major takeaway, her major wondering, or what we call in teaching essential questions. It's good to go at your text that you want to talk about with an essential question, right? So she ends with, it interposes, quoting the book, it interposes something artificial between the world. Oh, I'm sorry, is this coming back to, yeah, this is, oh, sorry. This is still quoting Nan Shepard. There was one other point where she came back to quoting the introduction, but I seem to have lost it. Not important. All right, so we're going to end with these words by Nan Shepard. It interposes something artificial between the world, the magic, right, which is one reality, and the self, which is another reality, though overlaid with a good many crusts of falseness and convention. And it is the fusion of these two realities that keeps life from corruption. So there seems to be something important, right, about the reality and the self, and them being connected in some way that keeps life from corrupting. And I'm guessing that self and that reality is the climber and the mountain, right, for Nan Shepard. And maybe we all need to find our mountain that puts us in direct relationship with that relationship between the self and the reality in a very directly responsible way. I was walking. That seems to be a peak experience for people, right? That seems to be I don't know if it's a life-changing experience, but it heightens the mind, right? It causes one to think in a very pinpoint, clear way about existence. And then ends with a bit of personal stuff again when she's walking to Port Authority, listening to it in her audio heads and everything, in her audio buds and all that good stuff. Again, it's nothing great, but it's a paragraph and a half, so that's fine. It's unfortunate it's right at the conclusion. I would have loved to just move on from the long quote to this last observation. So after all, to be in the wild alone is a step away, not just from comfort to routine, but from all the signifiers we labor over in our urban lives. It can be alarming, but in a world of self-help, this is true inspiration. Deeply admirable without the distance of heroism, bracing without stridency, and ultimately generous. So that's a beautiful, powerful paragraph of observation about this book, and well crafted and lovely prose by Sadie Stein, the reviewer. That, I think, is an extra for our reviews that we do on BookTube, right? I think you would have to be a scripted one to get it that clearly. Nor do I think we have to come up with, pull out that much from everything that we review. But that is what I would say is that if you hear that one paragraph, you hear why I think this review is worth emulating, and the extra that I think is missing from all the other reviews, a paragraph like that. But of course, she gives the last word, as is appropriate, to Nan Shepherd, the author. So, true inspiration, deeply admirable, without the distance of heroism, bracing without stridency, and ultimately generous. The Mountain Shepherd tells us is a corrective of glib assessment. So is its book. So that, my friends, is a kind of a nice template we can all aspire to in our BookTube discussions or reviews of works old and new. I think I know that people are so apologetic for looking down, which I think is hilarious in the case of a community of readers. I mean, I know ultimately everything could be written up on the screen and read, into your eyes. However, I'm not apologizing for looking down and sharing this with you. I think it's what we ought to be trying to do, I think, here on BookTube. Feel free to disagree. There it is. What I wanted to take out from this wonderful book review that New York Times review of books that my mom sent me from the States, which is actually timely. And June is over, but it's the summer issue, so I feel it's I'm in the zeitgeist right now. I'm in the conversation. What do they call that? Relevant. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it gave you some food for thought about the ways you'd like to approach talking about books. Tell me if I'm being too demanding or not, or missing things that are also important that I haven't covered in that brief sort of discussion. But there you go. That's what I wanted to say this evening. And thank you again for keeping me company tonight. It means the world.